Gemini. Sit still for a moment before you go any further, because something is already moving in the space around you, and I need you to feel it before I try to put it into words. There is a pull happening right now, faint but insistent, the way a room changes when someone walks into it behind you and you haven't turned around yet. You know that feeling. The air shifts. Your attention lifts on its own. That is what is happening in the unseen part of your life at this exact moment. And the reason you found your way to this reading is that some quiet part of you already sensed it and came looking for confirmation. You've arrived at precisely the right moment. And here at Sarah Angel Tarot, that kind of timing is never an accident. Let me tell you what I'm feeling as I settle into this. Because I want you to come with me slowly rather than have me announce conclusions you have no reason to trust yet. The first thing that reaches me is not a face or a name. It's a weight. Somewhere out there, a person is carrying something heavy in their chest, and they have been carrying it for far longer than they would ever admit out loud. It sits just behind the breastbone, that particular kind of heaviness that comes from words, swallowed too many times. And the strange, beautiful thing I want you to understand is that this weight has your shape. It is not a vague regret about life in general. It is specific. It is about you. Now watch how this unfolds, because it doesn't arrive all at once. What I'm sensing is a person in the middle of a very ordinary evening. Nothing dramatic is happening around them. There's the low hum of a room, the glow of a screen they aren't really looking at, the kind of quiet that lets thoughts get loud, and into that quiet, your name surfaces. Not because they scheduled it or decided to think of you. It simply rises the way certain memories rise when a person finally has nothing left to distract them. This is the moment before a moment. This is the pause right before someone reaches for something they've been avoiding. I want to be careful here, because I don't want you to mistake what I'm describing for weakness on their part. And I don't want you to feel any pressure to do anything at all with what I'm telling you. What's happening in them is closer to a thaw than a collapse. There is a difference. A collapse is when someone breaks under pressure and grasps for whatever comfort is nearest. A thaw is slower, and it is honest. It is what happens when something frozen finally warms enough to move again, and everything that was locked underneath begins to loosen. What has been frozen in this person is the truth about how much you mattered, and it is loosening now, and it cannot be refrozen. That's the part they don't know yet. Here is the hidden thing, the part underneath the part. For a long time, this person told themselves a story, and the story went something like this: that what happened between you was smaller than it felt, that time would sand it down to nothing, that moving forward simply meant not looking back. People build these stories to survive their own choices. They are not lies exactly. They are scaffolding. And scaffolding holds right up until the moment the building underneath it is finished settling, and then it comes down, because it was never meant to be permanent. The story this person told themselves has finished doing its job, and it is coming down now. And what's revealed behind it is not the tidy nothing they promised themselves. It's you still standing there in their memory, more solid than they expected. Feel how your own body responds as I say this, because your response is information too. If there's a tightening in your throat, if your eyes sting a little, that isn't fragility. That's recognition. Some part of you has been waiting to hear that you weren't imagining the depth of what you shared, that you didn't invent a connection out of loneliness, that the thing you grieved was real and worth grieving. It was real. I need you to have that plainly, without qualification. Whatever doubt crept in during the silence, whatever cruel little voice suggested that maybe it meant more to you than to them, I'm here to tell you that voice was wrong, and the evidence is arriving. Let me show you the shape of what this person has been hiding, because you deserve to understand it rather than just be told it exists. There were things they felt in real time and never named. A moment where they looked at you and understood with total clarity that they were in the presence of something rare, and instead of saying so, they changed the subject. A conversation where the honest response rose in their throat and they chose the safe one instead. A goodbye that they treated as casual because treating it as final would have required them to admit what they were losing. These are the confessions, not grand declarations. Small, specific, buried admissions that they have replayed more times than you could guess. And this is where I want to slow the whole reading down, because the word that keeps coming to me is not sorry. It's honesty. What is trying to reach you isn't primarily an apology. An apology is about the past. What's moving towards you is something that lives in the present tense. A person finally willing to be truthful about what they know and have always known. There's a version of a return that is just guilt looking for relief, and it burns out fast because guilt is exhausting to sustain. But there's another version, rarer, where a person comes back not to be forgiven but to stop pretending, and that kind lasts because truth doesn't require energy to maintain. It only requires courage to begin. Consider what the silence actually was, because I think you've been carrying an interpretation of it that was never accurate. You may have read the quiet as indifference, as proof that you were forgettable. But silence is one of the most misread things in all of human connection, and here is what I'm being shown about theirs. It wasn't the silence of someone who felt nothing. It was the silence of someone who felt too much and had no framework for it. There are people who go quiet precisely because the feeling is too large to fit into the small, ordinary words they have available, and rather than say it badly, they say nothing, and then the nothing calcifies, and they don't know how to break it. Their silence wasn't your unimportance. It was their overwhelm wearing a mask. I want you to notice something about the direction of this whole story, because it matters more than any single detail. Everything I'm sensing points one way, toward you. The heaviness in their chest points toward you. The name that surfaces in the quiet is yours. The confessions they've rehearsed are addressed to you. In a life full of scattered attention and 100 competing concerns, their focus has been quietly, persistently narrowing to a single point, and you are that point. You didn't have to fight for this. You didn't have to perform or convince or plead. It simply became true on its own, the way water finds its level, because some connections are not decisions. They are facts, and facts assert themselves eventually. There's a texture to what's coming that I want to prepare you for, because it may not look the way the movies taught you reconciliation looks. It might not begin with a sweeping speech. It might begin with something so small you almost miss it. A message that seems to have no real purpose. A question about something trivial that is clearly just an excuse to open a door. A reference to a memory you shared, dropped casually, watching to see if you'll pick it up. This is how frightened, hopeful people knock, gently, deniably, leaving themselves an exit in case the door doesn't open. And I'm telling you this so that you recognize it for what it is instead of dismissing it as nothing, because underneath that small, trembling gesture is everything they've been unable to say directly. There's an object I keep being shown, something ordinary that has quietly become a keeper of memory for them. It might be a place they've been avoiding because you're woven into it, a route they no longer take, a song they skip, a corner of a room where a certain conversation once happened. Avoidance like that is not the behavior of someone who has moved on. You don't build careful detours around things that no longer matter to you. You build them around things that still hold power, things that catch in your throat if you get too close. Every detour they've been quietly making is a small monument to how present you still are. And lately, those detours have been getting harder to sustain because the very thing they've been steering around is the thing they've started to want to walk straight toward. This is exactly the kind of quiet turning point that the reading shared through Sarah Angel Tarot exists to illuminate the moment before, the shift you can feel before you can see it. And I want to use this pause to turn the light toward you for a while. Because so far I've been describing them and you are not a supporting character in your own reading. You are the center of it. So let me tell you what I sense about where you actually stand, which may surprise you. You are not the same person who was hurt. That's the thing they don't fully understand yet. And it's the thing you may be underestimating about yourself. During the silence while they were freezing and you were waiting, you were also becoming. You did the harder, less visible work of surviving something and metabolizing it. You learned to sit with a question that had no answer. You learned to hold your own hand in the dark. You built a version of yourself that no longer depends on their return for its stability. And that version of you is the one they're about to encounter. And it is far more magnetic than the one they left, precisely because it isn't reaching for them anymore. Understand the strange mechanics of what happened there, because they're worth knowing. When you stopped waiting, something changed in the invisible field between you. Waiting has a frequency. It reaches out, it strains, it fills the space with a kind of pleading, even when no words are sent. And people, even people who love you, tend to pull back from that reach, not out of cruelty, but out of a nervous system's instinct to protect its own freedom. But when you finally release the reaching, when you turned your attention back to your own life and let them go, the strain vanished. And into that clean, open space, they could finally feel the truth of what they'd lost without feeling cornered by it. Your letting go didn't push them away. It's precisely what let them come close. So here is a truth I want you to hold with both hands. Their return, when it comes, is not the thing that heals you. You already began healing when you chose to live rather than wait. What their return offers is not repair. It's recognition. It's the universe circling back to hand you evidence of something you were brave enough to believe in, even when you had no proof. The healing was your own doing. The confession is simply confirmation that your instincts were sound, that your heart was not foolish, that the love you felt was answered even when the answer was too scared to speak. Let me name something about power, because I don't want you to walk into this moment misunderstanding where you stand. There is a very old, very tired idea that the person who returns holds every advantage, that they are doing you a kindness by coming back, that you should be grateful and quick to smooth everything over. Release that idea entirely. The one who comes back carrying confessions is not the one in the seat of power. You are. Not power in the sense of leverage to punish, but the deeper kind, the sovereignty of a person who has options, who has healed, who no longer needs the outcome to go any particular way in order to be whole. You get to choose how much of your heart to open and how quickly, and that choice is yours alone, and no amount of their tears removes it from your hands. And I want to be honest with you about the tears, because the title that brought you here spoke of tears and confession, and I don't want to let that image go by without telling you what it truly signifies. When a person who has held themselves rigid for a long time finally cries, it is not a performance, and it is not a bid for pity. It is the body doing what the mind couldn't. It is the physical release of everything that was held. Tears like that are the sound of scaffolding coming down, of a story finally told, of a truth that refused to stay buried any longer. If you witness it, don't read it as manipulation and don't read it as pressure to respond a certain way. Read it as proof that the feeling underneath was always genuine, and then decide from your own center what you want to do with that proof. Now, I want to take you somewhere gentler for a moment, into the part of this that is purely for you, regardless of what anyone else does. Because I would be doing you a disservice if I made your entire peace depend on their arrival. So let's set them aside briefly and speak only about you. There is a softness returning to you that the hard season pressed out of you for a while. Can you feel it beginning to come back? The capacity to be delighted by small things, the willingness to hope without bracing for disappointment, the quiet confidence that doesn't announce itself but simply lives in the way you carry your shoulders. This is yours. It was earned. And it would still be yours even in a world where no one ever came back at all, which is exactly why it makes you so ready for the world where someone does. There's a particular grace in the way life is arranging this for you, and I want you to see the artistry of it. It waited until you were strong enough to receive it without losing yourself. If the confession had come while you were still raw, still desperate, still willing to accept crumbs, you might have grabbed it and rebuilt something fragile on an unhealed foundation. But life, in its patience, held the moment back until you had done your growing, so that when the truth finally arrives, you can meet it standing up straight. That timing is not a delay you were being punished with. It was a protection you didn't know you were being given. Let me return to the person for a moment. because there's more surfacing, and I don't want to leave it unsaid. What they're preparing to confess isn't only about you and them as a pair. Part of what they've realized is about themselves. They've had to face the fact that they were a person who let fear make their decisions, who chose comfort over honesty, who mistook avoidance for peace. Coming back to you requires them to admit that to themselves first, and that's the harder confession, the private one that no one else will ever hear. They are, in their own quiet way, growing too. The version of them that reaches for you now is a version that has had to become braver, more honest, more willing to risk embarrassment for the sake of truth. That's not nothing. That's a real change in a real person. I keep being drawn back to the specificity of what they've held, so let me give you a little more of it, because generalities are easy to dismiss and specifics are harder to ignore. There is something they never told you about the way you made them feel seen. Some ordinary moment where you understood them without them having to explain, and it startled them and it frightened them a little because being known is intimate in a way that being wanted is not. Being wanted is flattering, being known is vulnerable, and you knew them, and they've spent the silence realizing how rare that was and how carelessly they treated it. And part of what's rising in them now is the ache of having been truly understood by someone and having failed to hold on to it. Notice how the whole architecture of this is built on truth rather than fantasy, and let that reassure you. I'm not describing a fairy tale where everything is perfect and no one has to do any real work. I'm describing something better and more durable, which is two people arriving at honesty. What makes this hopeful isn't that the past is being erased. It's that the truth is being told at last, and truth is the only ground solid enough to build anything lasting on. Whatever you choose to build or not build, you'll be doing it on real ground now, with the facts finally on the table, and that is an enormous gift compared to the fog of not knowing that you've been living in. I want to speak to the doubt that I know is still sitting in you, the small voice asking whether any of this is real or whether you're just hoping. That voice deserves an answer rather than dismissal. Here's the answer. The fact that you can still feel the pull of this connection after everything, after the silence and the doubt and the effort of moving on, is itself the evidence. Connections that were never real fade cleanly and leave no residue. The ones that were real leave a low, persistent hum that you can feel even when you've decided to stop listening. You've been feeling that hum. It's not delusion. It's the connection announcing that it was never actually severed, only paused, and paused things can resume. Let me widen the lens for a moment and talk about what this whole experience has taught you, because there's a wisdom you've earned that will outlast this particular story. You've learned that you can survive uncertainty. That's not small. So many people are ruled entirely by their need for certainty, and it makes them frantic and controlling and unable to rest. But you sat in the not knowing for a long stretch, and you didn't shatter. You found a way to keep living inside an open question. That capacity is now permanently yours, and it will serve you in every future situation where life asks you to be patient without guarantees. This connection didn't just break your heart, it expanded your capacity, and an expanded heart holds more of everything, including joy. There's something I want to say about forgiveness, because the title carries that word and I don't want to leave it hollow. Forgiveness is one of the most misunderstood movements of the human heart. People think it means saying that what happened was acceptable, or that they're obligated to let someone back in, or that they have to pretend they weren't hurt. It means none of those things. Forgiveness is simply the moment you stop letting the injury run your life. It's for you, not for them. You can forgive someone completely and still choose distance. You can forgive them and choose closeness. The forgiveness and the choice are two separate things, and you hold both, and no one gets to rush either one. When the confession comes, you don't owe anyone an instant decision. You're allowed to receive it, feel it fully, and take all the time your heart requires. I want to describe the atmosphere I sense gathering around your near future, because it has a quality I don't want you to miss. It's warm. There's a lightness coming that you haven't felt in a while. the kind that shows up not as fireworks, but as an easing, a sense that a long-held breath is finally being let out. Things that felt stuck are loosening, not just in this one relationship, but in the general weather of your life, as though the resolution of this held question frees up energy that was tied down and lets it flow into other rooms. When one significant knot in a person's life comes untied, the whole rope relaxes. You may find that as this clears, other things you didn't even connect to it begin to move too. Something else is shifting that has nothing to do with them and everything to do with the way you move through the world now. The people around you can feel it, even the ones who know nothing about the story. There's a lightness returning to your presence that others respond to without quite understanding why. A sense that you've found your way back to yourself. And this matters for what's approaching, because the person returning to you will not be meeting the guarded, brace for impact version they might have imagined. They'll be meeting someone who has visibly flourished in their absence, and there is nothing more disarming, nothing that speaks louder than a person who healed on their own. Your wholeness will say more in a single, unhurried glance than any speech could, and it will quietly set the tone for everything that follows. The gentlest guidance always circles back to exactly this, helping you trust the quiet signals your own intuition was already sending before anyone confirmed them out loud. And speaking of intuition, I want to honor yours directly because it has been more accurate than you've given it credit for. Every time you sensed that it wasn't really over, you were right. Every time you felt them think of you across the distance and then talked yourself out of believing it, your first instinct was the true one, and the talking out of it was the fear. Learn this lesson well, because it's one of the most valuable things you can take from all of this. Your intuition is not fooling you. It's the doubt that fools you. When the two disagree, the quiet knowing is almost always the truthful one. Let me offer you something practical to hold, not instructions exactly, but a posture. When the moment arrives, whatever form it takes, I want you to receive it from your center rather than from your wound. The wound wants to react instantly, to either fling the door open in relief or slam it shut in self-protection. Both of those are the wound talking. Your center is quieter. Your center can hear what's actually being said, can feel whether the person in front of you has truly changed, can take its time. So when it comes, breathe first. Let the first wave of feeling pass through you without acting on it. Then respond from the steady place, the one you built during all those months of standing on your own. That steady place will not steer you wrong. There's a tenderness I feel toward the version of you that almost gave up, and I want to speak to them for a second. Because there were nights, weren't there, when you decided this was foolish, when you told yourself to stop hoping, when you tried to force your heart to close the file and move on completely? That version of you was doing their best with the information they had. Don't be hard on them. They were protecting you. But they were also, without knowing it, keeping a small flame lit in a back room, refusing to fully extinguish something they couldn't quite believe was meant to end. That refusal, which felt like weakness, turns out to have been wisdom. The part of you that couldn't let go entirely was in contact with the truth your rational mind couldn't access. I want to talk about trust, because it's going to matter in whatever comes next. Not blind trust, which is just recklessness wearing an optimistic face, but earned trust, the kind that gets rebuilt slowly through consistent action over time. If you choose to let this person back towards you in any capacity, you don't have to hand them the trust they had before as though nothing happened. Trust is a currency that gets spent and must be re-earned, and there's no shame in asking someone to earn it. In fact, the willingness to let it be rebuilt slowly is one of the healthiest things you can bring to a second chapter. The people worth reconnecting with are the ones who understand that and don't resent the process. Watch for whether they honor the pace your heart needs, because that will tell you almost everything. Here's a subtle thing I want to name about worth, because it sits underneath this entire situation. Somewhere along the way, you may have absorbed the idea that if you had been enough, they never would have gone quiet in the first place. Pull that belief out and look at it in the light, because it's false all the way through. Their silence was never a measurement of your worth. It was a measurement of their capacity in that season, and capacity and worth are entirely different things. A person can fail to hold something precious Not because it isn't precious, but because their hands weren't ready. Your value was never on trial. It was constant the entire time, whether they could perceive it or not, and it remains constant now, independent of what anyone chooses to do about it. Let me draw your attention to how much choice you actually have here, because I don't want you to slip into feeling that this is all happening to you. You are not a passive recipient of someone else's change of heart. You are an active author of what comes next. Every path is genuinely open. You could welcome them and build something new and wiser. You could take it slow and watch and decide as you go. You could receive the confession, feel the completion it offers, and still choose to walk a separate road with a peaceful heart. Not one of those choices is wrong. They're all available and they're all yours. And the point of this reading is not to push you toward any of them, but to make sure you know that the power to choose is fully, unquestionably in your hands. I want to sit with the idea of completion for a moment, because even in the best possible reconciliation, something is being completed, and completion is its own kind of gift. For a long time, you had a wound with a missing piece, an unanswered question at its center, and unanswered questions keep wounds from closing. The confession, whatever else it does or doesn't lead to, answers the question. It closes the loop. It hands you the missing piece. And even if you decided to do nothing else with it, that completion alone would let a part of you finally rest that has been unable to rest for a long time. There is peace waiting in the simple act of finally knowing, and that peace belongs to you no matter what road you choose afterward. Feel how different this is from the desperate hoping you may have done in the harder days. Back then, a return would have meant rescue. Now it means something cleaner. It means recognition between two people who see each other honestly, one of whom has grown enough to tell the truth and one of whom has grown enough to receive it without losing herself. That's not a rescue. That's a meeting of equals. And a meeting of equals is the only foundation on which anything worth having has ever been built. You're not being saved. You're being met. And being met is what you actually wanted all along. Underneath the wanting to be saved that the pain temporarily disguised it as. I want to acknowledge the courage it takes to even hope after being disappointed, because you're doing that right now simply by listening to this and letting it in. Hope is not naive. Naivety is hoping while ignoring reality. What you're doing is braver than that. You're hoping with your eyes open, holding both the possibility that this is real and the knowledge that you'll be all right regardless. That's the most mature form of hope there is, and it's a sign of exactly how far you've come. The old you hoped in order to escape the present. This you hopes from a place of fullness, as an addition to a life that's already stable. That shift alone is worth more than any single outcome. There's a quiet certainty settling over me as this reading deepens, and it's this: the truth is going to come out. Whatever fear has been keeping this person's confession locked away is losing its grip, and honesty is going to win, because honesty always eventually wins when the feeling underneath is strong enough. What has been unspoken is not going to stay unspoken. The thaw I described at the beginning has passed the point where it could refreeze. Something true is going to be said out loud, and you are going to hear it. And the version of reality where you wondered forever whether it was real is not the version you're living in. You're living in the one where it gets confirmed. And here's a small thing about how the truth will sound when it comes, so that you can recognize it for what it is. It probably won't be poetic. People who have silently rehearsed a confession 100 times often deliver it plainly when the moment finally arrives, almost clumsily, the polished version abandoned in favor of something simpler and more true. Don't wait for eloquence. The realest confessions are frequently the least graceful, because grace requires distance, and this will have none. If what reaches you sounds a little bare, a little unrehearsed, despite all the private rehearsing, take that as one of the surest signs that it's genuine. Rehearsed lies come out smooth. It's the truth that stumbles, because the truth is nervous about whether it will be received. Let me speak to what happens inside you when it does. because I want you to be ready to honor your own reaction. You might feel joy, and you're allowed to feel it without guilt or hesitation. You might feel a wave of old anger surface alongside the relief, and that's allowed too, because anger and love aren't opposites and both can be present at once. You might feel a strange calm, an almost anticlimactic quiet, as though a part of you always knew and is simply nodding at the arrival of the expected. Whatever comes, let it come. Don't perform the reaction you think you're supposed to have. Your real reaction, whatever it is the honest one, and honesty is what this whole moment is made of. Meet their truth with your own. I want to remind you of something about time that this experience has been teaching you, because it reframes the whole difficult stretch you've been through. The silence felt like time being wasted, like a long, empty corridor you were forced to walk for no reason. But nothing was wasted. That corridor was where you built the self that can now handle this well. Every quiet, lonely, seemingly pointless stretch of it was doing invisible work, forging the steadiness you're about to draw on. If any of it had been shorter, you might not be as ready as you are. Time you thought was being stolen from you was actually being invested in you, and you're about to see the return on that investment. There's a beauty in the symmetry of this that I hope you can appreciate, even in the middle of feeling it. You were the one who kept the connection's true value in your heart, even when it cost you. And now the confirmation arrives that you were right to. The one who forgot is remembering. The one who doubted is being shown proof. The scales, which have felt so unbalanced for so long, are quietly leveling. This is what it looks like when a heart's patience is honored, when the universe circles back to say, you weren't foolish, you weren't imagining it. The thing you protected was worth protecting. Let yourself receive that vindication gently. You don't have to be triumphant about it. You can simply let it settle in as a quiet, warm confirmation that your heart knew what it was doing. As this reading begins to close, I want to leave you standing in your own strength rather than watching the horizon for someone else's arrival. Because the deepest truth here is not about them at all. It's about the fact that you became someone who could weather this, hold your worth through the silence, and arrive at this moment intact and even expanded. Whatever knocks on your door, you are the sovereign of what happens next. You get to choose from wholeness rather than from lack. And choosing from wholeness is the surest way there is to a good outcome. Trust the steadiness you built. It was hard won, and it will not fail you now. Carry this with you as you go. The thing you hoped for was never as far away as the silence made it feel, and the you who receives it is stronger than the you who first longed for it. Whenever you feel that quiet pull to return to your own center and listen to what your intuition already knows, the guidance offered through Sarah Angel Tarot will be right here, holding the light steady for you. Go gently now. Something true is on its way to you, and you are more than ready to meet it. Breathe, stay soft, and let the good thing come.